The concept of using history to find inspiring and interesting stories shouldn't be too complicated of one to understand. History is filled with almost every single type of story, from adventure and action to romance and drama. You have at your fingertips a rich, diverse and interesting tapestry of true tales that can help inspire your own story. It's obvious then that you have a near limitless resource of stories, tales, characters, events, actions, and interconnected stories that can all be extremely useful to you as a writer when designing and creating your own story. Today, I want to go over a little bit on how you can use history and how you should use it appropriately when you're trying to find more inspiration and more ideas for your own work. I recently read the account of Sir Robert Rollo Giuseppe, known as the bravest man to wear a red coat, and was stunned that his life hadn't been adapted into a novel or a film already. In brief, the man was a quintessential British archetype of the colonial era. Gave up a spot at Cambridge to join the army and a lust for adventure. He married his sweetheart, took part in duels, shipwrecked in the Caribbean, won battles, killed 6 intruders who broke into his house at night, negotiated with and was reportedly greatly respected by Toussaint Louverture during the Haitian Revolution, met the King of England, went on foot to Java and India, avoiding pirates and healing Arab chiefs to escape slavery on the way. He then took part in multiple wars, arresting sultans, suppressing rebellions and killing tigers that threatened his men. Sir Robert was ultimately killed by the Nepalese, who were so impressed with his bravery that it laid the foundation for the Gurkhas volunteering to have a regiment within the British Army that still exists now. The point I'm making here isn't necessarily to glorify what Sir Robert did, but more to show that in history we have some fantastic and compelling stories that are hardly believable in today's modern world. In his account, we can see one person doing so many things that we couldn't possibly dream of in the modern world. While we may not directly use Sir Robert's stories, what a story such as this does allow us to do is to interpret and take elements from that can then be useful in our own. More than that, it can show us how many elements we can include in a story, how many fantastical things can happen to one character and the story still be not only believable, but real. And this is real. This did really happen. Sir Robert's escapades are well documented. They show us how we can apply a single character to multiple situations, how that character can grow over a journey that spans the entire world. That's really exciting, and as a writer, whether you agree or disagree with any of historical actions that Sir Robert took, we can still see the growth of character and the adventures that one person can go on in a single lifetime. This gives us an enormous amount of range that we can put our characters through, the trials that they could experience and the adventures that they could go on themselves. Even branching off the same figure in Sir Robert, we can find interesting and equally compelling characters, such as Toussaint Louverture and his life where he was born into slavery, unable to read or earn his own freedom. It turned out that he had actually been freed previously, but no one had told him, so he started his own plantation, along with owning his own slaves, in order to climb the social ladder with wealth. As rebellion simmered in Haiti, Louverture became an increasingly prominent figure on the island and amongst the African-descended population. Inspired by the French Revolution, Louverture played the Spanish and the French against one another to build his own influence and the case of independence for Haiti. His influence grew to such an extent that he was able to undermine French rule, get the abolition of slavery, and eventually negotiated the withdrawal of the later British occupation of Port-au-Prince. Louverture was ultimately arrested by the returning French and died in prison. But his story is a complex and nuanced one that gives us yet another fantastic example of a deeply interesting and nuanced and complex character. Something that history does extraordinarily well, as long as we're willing to put in the honest work for it, is give us rich, detailed, complex, but contextualized characters that can challenge our modern perspectives. Historical figures give us so much more than just of what a person is based on face value or their surface achievements. Instead, what we get is a tapestry, a rich deep dive into a real person who really existed, who was nuanced, complicated, and complex. This allows us to better understand what a good character should look like, how they should feel, how they should behave, and what actions someone might take in a contextually consistent environment. They give you a great chance to flex your researching muscles, to find the subtleties, contradictions, and intrigue that every single historical figure and personality has. This is invaluable when you're trying to make your own characters, for helping you understand that actors need to be multi-layered. They are not black and white. They must have principles, ambitions, and flaws. That they have skills, traits, and abilities that make them suited for some situations, but not others, and therefore they are not infallible or perfect. More than that, looking at history allows you to see the interconnectedness of events, and how even small actions can influence the course of individuals, ideas, and countries. The ripples of history are such potent sources for you to see the importance of planning in your own story. How actions taken by your characters or events that unfold need to be properly accounted for, their impacts felt and their inception considered. If history teaches us anything, it is the origin of everything now, and the power of consequences as well as of coincidence and design. The effects of Socrates are still felt in the classroom of European countries now. Sun Tzu still influences military doctrine around the world. Napoleon's conquest of Europe defined the Euro-nationalism of the 19th century. Boudica personifies the British spirit. The atomic bombings of Japan form their pacifist nature now, and the Rwandan genocide changed the nation beyond recognition, as well as the Sierra Leone civil war leading to a wave of national forgiveness, tolerance, and the changing of tug of war to tug of peace. The impact of history, big and small, shows us the power of actions and how important it is that we take these details into consideration when we're planning our own story. The degree to which you use history is partially up to you. Do you want to write historical fiction and take every single detail into account, like in Patrick O'Brien's Master and Commander series? Or do you want to simply use history as the backdrop for your story, like Jane Austen did? Are you more interested in taking certain figures or people and repurposing their characters into new actors like Don Quixote? Or perhaps you just like the sequence of events, and you want to put your own spin on things in a fantasy-like way, such as what George R.R. Martin has done for A Song of Ice and Fire. The possibilities here are endless, and they allow you to have a huge amount of flexibility in how you borrow and apply the elements of history. Of course, the main disclaimer here, when you're using history, is making sure you're being accurate where you need to be, unless you are explicitly saying that what you're writing is fictional. The more closely your story resembles actual history, the more attention you need to pay to history and its context. Not everything in history is the way we want the world to be now, nor is everything we perceive as being good in history necessarily able to survive in the modern world. Expecting history to fit our modern views is narcissistic and arrogant. History has happened. As L.P. Hartley says, the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. We must avoid the temptation to judge history and the people in it too harshly, or change them to behave how we wish they had or hadn't at the time. We can see how history ended up playing out and tend to impose the idea that we would have behaved better. But we have the luxury of knowing what happened next. People in history didn't, and don't, have that luxury. They made good and bad choices in times and places where they were, the situations and shibboleths that they found themselves with. When using history, look with eyes from the past, not with eyes of the present, and as a result you will find a treasure trove of useful inspiration that many modern writers have chosen to ignore, as the truth of history is too inconvenient for their modern sensibilities. Almost everything that you need to write a story is contained in history. You have characters, messages, themes, conflicts, both figurative and literal. All the ingredients for creating a great, compelling and interesting story are right there, in the books and on the internet that has documented it. The pieces that are needed to create a great story are all there. They might need some tweaking, or some interpreting, or some extrapolation and imagination in order to make them fully functional and useful for your own story, but they're there. If you're willing to put in the hard work, take the honest approach to try and contextually analyze the historical things that happened, and be honest about what you're applying to your own story while still trying to keep some semblance of your own originality, then you have a fantastic resource that is unmatched by anything else that you have available. It can show us both horror and beauty. It can show us ingenuity and lethargy. It can show us adventure and cowardice. It can show us the whole range of every single human emotion that maybe we've never seen before. If you're somebody who doesn't have the opportunity to go out about into the real world to find these things as they happen, well, you have history with all of the things that have happened before. Every human emotion and experience is contained within the pages of history. It's up to you to find them.